This is CBC Nova Scotia News.
Tonight on strike, thousands of Canada Post workers walk off the job, disrupting deliveries ahead of the holidays. On the campaign trail, we take a look at what the three main political parties are promising on women's health. And, oh, rats! Residents in Cape Breton are complaining about the growing rodent population.
Those persistent northerly gusty winds are finally easing. However, we're going to hang on to a chance of showers throughout the weekend. Your full forecast details are coming up.
Good evening. If you're planning to mail a letter or send a parcel through Canada Post, you may want to hold off. All 55,000 members of the Canadian Union of Postal Workers have gone on strike. A job action that couldn't have come at a worse time for many Canadian residents and businesses with the holiday season beginning. The CBC's Sophia Harris has the details on what's happening and why.
Canada Post workers took to the streets Friday morning, but not to deliver mail. They walked off the job after their union and Canada Post failed to negotiate a new contract agreement. Negotiations are ongoing, but Canada Post and its workers remain far apart on key issues like wages. The Crown Corporation has proposed an 11.5% raise over 4 years. The union is pushing for almost double that amount.
The Grinch seems to have stolen Christmas for us. And for the holidays, we want to be able to work, but we want a fair contract at decent wages. The cost of living has gone up. It's affected us greatly.
Canada Post says it's struggling to keep afloat a business in decline due to encroaching competition from private carriers.
We're losing in the parcel business because we're not competitive. So we've got to put forward a plan and a proposal that we can afford and will allow us to grow.
The strike will bring Canada Post operations to a virtual standstill, hitting hard Canadians that rely on the service, including those in rural communities like Whitbourne, Newfoundland, which count on Canada Post for most of their deliveries.
It's going to put a lot of people in a hard state, just before Christmas. People want to get on the ball and get ahead of it, and it's like, this is not a great time for this.
It affects families, it affects seniors, and it also affects the bottom line for those who receive their checks in the mail.
Canada Post says essential checks like old age security will still be delivered. Nevertheless, the pressure is on for the federal government to find a solution.
I'm not looking at any other solution other than negotiation right now. Every day is a new day in collective bargaining, and we are going to continue to support the parties in any way we can.
If you've already posted mail, expect delays. Even after the strike is over, there will be a backlog of deliveries to deal with. Sophia Harris, CBC News, Toronto.
Some union members in Sydney were out in the rain on the picket lines this morning.
People are definitely upset. We don't want to strike. That wasn't necessarily the goal, but when you've got unfair negotiations going on at the table, that was now our only option. They were out until 10 o'clock last night negotiating, and the fact that they can't get it there is it's unfortunate.
Pappas says they sometimes work 7 days a week to compete with private delivery companies. Yes, so Ryan, a damp day, but some much needed rain.
Much needed, not enough, unfortunately. We've been hearing from folks on the South Shore, their wells are going dry or at least getting dangerously low. And now we have the Halifax area, Halifax Water, asking residents in Dartmouth, Cole Harbour, Eastern Passage to begin conserving their water. Anybody that gets their water from Lake Major, and that's because that lake is running very, very low. This dates all the way back to the middle of August, and these blue bars are where we've seen rain. There aren't a lot of them. Only about 170 millimeters at Lake Major since mid-August, should be closer to 400 millimeters. And this was really amplified in the month of October. It was so dry across most of the province, South Shore especially. And so when we add all this up, in fact, the last time we had above average precipitation across the province was way back in March. So it has been running near or drier than normal for quite a while. And now the Canadian Drought Monitor has updated our conditions, and you can see all of the province is at least abnormally dry. Moderate drought conditions for a good chunk of the South Shore, the Halifax area, the Northeast, and up into Cape Breton. So it's a good thing we had the rain today, and we have more shower chances through next week. We'll talk about that with your 7-day coming up.
All right, we sure will. Thanks, Ryan.
Thank you.
On the campaign trail today, Liberal leader Zach Churchill says that if his party wins the provincial election, they have a plan to help build 80,000 new homes by 2030. Churchill says the party would also reduce or eliminate tax increases for 5 years on properties that build more housing, such as granny suites or tiny homes.
We have heard from a lot of young people across this province who are actually losing hope in being able to afford a future here, to find a place to live that's not in their parents' house. We want to give hope back to those young people.
Meanwhile, NDP leader Claudia Chender touted her party's plan to reduce the small business tax from 2.5% to 1.5%. Chender says almost 30,000 businesses would benefit from the change.
This program is going to help these almost 30,000 small businesses from one end of this province to the other to grow and contribute to the economy.
PC leader Tim Houston spent the day campaigning and did not make an official announcement. Voters in the district of West Hants have 4 choices on the ballot in this provincial election. As Michael Gorman reports, emergency department closures and an unfinished highway project are among the main issues in the race.
PC candidate Melissa Sheehy-Richard won the Hants West seat last time by 141 votes. Her party's promise to fix health care has been tested here by increased emergency department closures. But Sheehy-Richard says progress is happening.
We have a same-day, next-day clinic that should be opening soon. We've made a lot of changes in our ED department to help with the closures. We've just hired 5 new RNs, most of which are from here.
Liberal candidate Brian Casey isn't as optimistic about the PC plan for health care, and he remains concerned about emergency department closures. Casey says the PCs have neglected the area and spent 3 years fighting with Ottawa about how to complete the Highway 101 twinning project. That work remains unfinished with no end in sight and has divided the community.
To me, it's just there's too many people playing games and not worried about the safety of the people and the people of West Hants and what they want and what they need, and just leave politics out of it. Everybody should be able to get along.
NDP candidate Simon Greeno is advocating the district go orange for the first time. He says the party has the best plan to help people struggling the most with the cost of rent and food.
If we can address, poverty, if we can address food insecurity, that also goes a long way to helping the healthcare question, taking some of the burden off the healthcare system as well. If people are able to live happy and healthy lives.
James Omond is running as an independent candidate in the race. He says the decision by PC leader Tim Houston to call a snap election puts him at even more of a disadvantage because he did not have time to order signs, and he's juggling campaigning with his day job as a carpenter. Omond says he's running because he was disillusioned by his own communication with politicians.
If I ask what's going on, I expect to receive an answer. When I stopped getting the answers, I decided I'm tired of telling politicians that I'm not happy with the way they're doing the work, and I decided to run to see if I can do it myself.
Election Day is 12 days away. Michael Gorman, CBC News, Windsor.
After some delay, we now have platforms from all 3 major parties after the NDP released theirs this week. They've all made promises to improve health care for women. Here's Taryn Grant with insight into how the parties are distinguishing themselves on this topic.
In the last provincial election, the Tories charged ahead of the other parties by focusing on health care. This time, every party knows it's a top issue for voters. Political scientist Catherine Farrellbeck told me that begs an interesting question.
How are the parties going to distinguish themselves on healthcare? And one way of doing that, of course, might be the women's vote.
There's a notable shift in this election in the attention the major parties are giving to healthcare for women. Farrellbeck says you don't have to look any further than public polling data to understand why. Let's start with the Tories.
There's a lot of work to do for sure, particularly a lot of work to do around women's health.
Their big promise for women is that they'll create a clinic for treating the symptoms of menopause. The World Health Organization says menopause hits most women between the ages of 45 and 55. That's an important voting bloc for progressive conservatives, one they probably want to shore up. As for the Liberals, they're promising to appoint a cabinet minister to focus on women's health, to boost research funding for women's health issues, and to provide free period products in all provincial buildings.
Women deserve better from our healthcare system. They need better. A Nova Scotia Liberal government has a plan to address this in a tangible and meaningful way.
Generally, the Liberals seem to have much more support from women than men. Again, this is probably an edge that they want to secure. Now, the NDP.
Today, we're announcing our plan to better support women's health.
Their platform includes things that are meant to protect and expand abortion access and expand midwifery services. It seems the NDP are focusing on women in their reproductive years. And which voting bloc gave the NDP the most support? Young adults. People who are likely to be thinking about or dealing with issues around reproduction. Now, whatever the reason, isn't it just a good thing that politicians are focusing on women's health? Dr. Aruna Dara is a family physician in Halifax, and she says yes, but
I think it is an incomplete story of what it means to care for women's health.
Dara says these promises exclude some women, including trans women, and they focus mostly on what she describes as downstream interventions, like medical procedures. She favors upstream interventions to improve people's overall health, things like better working conditions, income equality, and food security.
In thinking about the downstream effects, I think we're actually missing where there are huge opportunities for us to make big impacts.
So, will these promises actually appeal to the intended voters? We won't know until November 26th. But what might be more interesting to watch is what happens after that and whether the parties and politicians follow through with their promises.
And some sad news to pass along. Celebrated Nova Scotia artist Tom Forestall has died at the age of 88. He won critical acclaim in the 1960s as part of a renewed interest in realist painting. Forestall's work can be found in major public and private collections across Canada.
Well, he was one of the three most famous Atlantic realists. You know, it was him and Mary Pratt and Christopher Pratt. They were all students of Alex Colville, and they created a form of a way of painting, a way based in Atlantic Canada that was, really unique in the whole country. And they were really among the best known artists from the 60s right through to the present day in Canada.
Forestall was born in Middleton but lived in Dartmouth for most of his life. Well, trash-eating critters are a growing problem in Sydney. People living in the area say rats are becoming bigger in size and numbers. Erin Potty has that story.
People in Sydney say they want something to be done about the growing rat problem. John McLean has lived in the same house for 27 years. But lately, he says there's been more critters scurrying around.
Last 3 years, triple. It's just, they're everywhere. Summertime, me and my neighbors sitting out in the step out front, and we looked across the street. We counted 23 rats coming underneath the house, from underneath the house.
McLean says an illegal dump site in a fire lane near his home is part of the problem.
Well, there's garbage in the alleyway there, and that has something to do with the rats coming around here. I mean, they're that big. I seen a rat chase a cat the other day. Seriously, I never seen them that big.
McLean's landlord put up long pieces of steel around the home, but he says that's not fixing the problem.
My dog caught two of them. So hopefully something be done about this. It's going to be hard because it's everywhere. Not just in this neighborhood, it's everywhere.
Packs of rats have been spotted near dumpsters in the Cape Breton Regional Municipality. A video circulating on Facebook shows a colony near a Tim Hortons in Whitney Pier. Tim Hortons Canada say there have been no issues with rats inside the restaurant, and the store's owner is now working to fix the problem. The municipality is also involved.
Our inspectors and whatnot have been there daily for the last number of days, but that can create sometimes some other issues. You know, if the infestation were the rodents killed, or were they exterminated, or were they just moved along. So now we're monitoring to see if there's any further impact of this event in the neighborhood.
Lamy says CBRM staff will be working with local restaurants and other property owners to ensure garbage is properly disposed of. Inspectors can issue fines to people not following the rules. They range in price from $700 to upwards of $50,000. Erin Potty, CBC News, Sydney.
There's a peek at the lights of Halifax Harbour on this Friday night. Ryan is up next. Welcome back. Last night's debate here at our studios sure gave our political reporters plenty to think about. But the real question is how it affected voters. The CBC's Jean Laroche and Taryn Grant shared their analysis of what happened over 90 minutes.
So, Jean, these were front row seats for what happened in there not so long ago. The three leaders of the major parties in Nova Scotia had their first head-to-head in CBC's debate.
Well, what's interesting is we didn't really have the kind of disastrous debate that Biden had with Trump in the States, and we didn't have a really defining moment like we did back in 1998.
Will you resign as Premier of this province? Yes or no?
Do you wish to respond, or shall Mr. Ham continue?
That was seen as a turning point in that election where the Liberals barely hung on to power in that vote.
Yeah, so no major gaffes in this debate. There was a lot of leaders talking over each other, everyone trying to get their voice heard and trying to get the last word.
When it is housing,
listen,
we make housing. When it is not appropriate for housing, then we don't. But we make the decision.
And we didn't hear really anything new from the three leaders. We would heard well-worn phrases, well-worn slogans. We heard them in the House. We've heard them in the lead up to this election and through this election. But for anyone who was kind of tuning in for the first time, it would have been the first time they'd have heard some of what the leaders had to say in terms of laying out their platform.
Right, we heard some of the new platform promises that have just come out during this election campaign over the last few weeks, but no big announcements, except for Zach Churchill saying that if he was elected premier and he doesn't live up to all of the promises he made, things that he calls a contract with Nova Scotians, he says he wouldn't run again.
Well, it ended up an interesting line from Chender after the debate, speaking to reporters who basically said, look, he'll never get a chance to do that, a suggestion that his party will not win government.
It was also interesting to hear Claudia Chender addressing the other leaders by their first names while they were a bit more formal with Mr. Churchill and Miss Chender, but she was right out the gates calling out Tim Houston as Tim and talking to Zach Churchill as Zach.
Thanks for being here tonight. Thanks, Tim and Zach.
Really sending the signal that she has found her place with these two other leaders at the podium in this election.
And let's remember that Nova Scotia has never had a female premier.
So whether this actually changes anybody's mind, well, we won't know that until Election Day. What this does, though, and what the leaders are really trying to do is energize their base, and make their volunteers excited about what's to come, which is 12 days of slog, making sure now that you've identified the vote to get those people to the polls and marking their ballots.
All right, Ryan, so the weekend has arrived. Maybe not the best for outdoors.
But there will be opportunities for sure. And especially, so I think the wettest period of the whole weekend for most of us is going to be Saturday morning, minus Cape Breton, who you folks will get pretty damp Sunday afternoon as that next system moves in. We'll talk all about that and the timing. First, I want to give a shout out to some great kids who we had a virtual visit yesterday, but of course the debate was last
busy,
night.
yep.
So getting them on the air today.
Good looking crew there.
Yeah. Colonel John Stewart Elementary in Cole Harbour and the grade 5s. They were a great group, lots of great questions. And the visits continue as we move through the next few weeks. I love this time of year. And of course, the grade 5s are doing a weather unit right now.
Perfect.
So it makes it's a great time for both of us for sure because they're asking lots of great questions. High temperatures today. You can see we did get up to 10 degrees in Cape Breton today. The rest of the mainland pretty much stuck in those mid-single digits, and that is pretty much where we are right now. 10 degrees in Cheticamp and at Canso. Most of us, though, firmly in that 3 to 7 range. As we look at the winds, boy, they have been just so persistent this week, haven't they? But they are going to continue to ease through tonight, thankfully. Sustained right now, 15, 20, 52 at Westport, 33 at Yarmouth, and this is where we are seeing the strongest gusts here. But those winds, as this this main band of rain continues to kind of work its way out, the strongest winds dissipating, and there's just some lighter winds in the wake of this. Still scattered showers, periods of rain, in fact, will come through steadily around this low tonight. It'll taper off to scattered showers, then isolated showers tomorrow. And this is the new low, which is going to be working its way in, wrapping into that current low. And so it'll get a spin up that'll be more fuel for the fire, and it will continue to impact us right into early next week. Tonight, temperatures 5, 6, 7, 8 degrees. So pretty similar to what we're seeing out there. And note, lots of green on the map here through tonight. These are the periods of rain becoming a little more shower-like into Saturday morning. We'll be watching as we move into the afternoon, that low spinning around just north of Prince Edward Island. It'll start to fizzle, and so there just won't be as much energy. And so as a result, expecting those showers to become fairly isolated into the afternoon. So really not a bad Saturday afternoon I'm expecting for a good portion of the province. A, because it won't be nearly as wet. B, because the winds won't be nearly as wicked as they have been all week. Southerly winds for tomorrow should get back into the double-digit range for Cape Breton tomorrow, with temperatures right around the 10-degree mark. For central parts of the island, or of the mainland rather, we're going to be looking at temperatures ranging between 8 and 10 as well, with those northwest winds, but light. Similar story for western parts of the mainland, and note double-digit potential here, Lunenburg down to Shelburne with that light northwest wind. Now into the Saturday night, Sunday time period. Some breaks in the cloud, but I'm expecting that cloud is going to dominate through Sunday. We could see a couple of sunny breaks for the far west of the province. Note for Sunday with the clouds, the northerly wind starting to increase again because this next low is approaching from the east. Periods of rain for Cape Breton into the afternoon, Guysborough, possibly Antigonish County, maybe edging into Pictou. Looks like the Halifax area remaining dry through the day. And then, as I'll show you here in a moment, we will start to fill in with those showers. So Sunday, temperatures right around 8-9 degrees. And with those winds picking up, I think into the afternoon, looks like we could start to see some gusts back in the 30 to 40 range. So the wind's a bit more of a factor on Sunday. Now, there is a snapshot Sunday evening, and note that rain line. Now, some drier air just off to the west, so it looks like that won't be able to budge too much further Sunday night into Monday. But as that low kind of is persistent spinning there, I am expecting that kind of fills in with a better chance for some showers pushing all the way across Nova Scotia on Monday. Temperatures right near 7 degrees. Showers on Tuesday, again, kind of unsettled, but not a washout by any stretch. Some sun breaks Wednesday into Thursday, and then looks like our next significant system pushing in for Friday of next week, but that's still quite a long ways out.
It's much needed, though, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
All right. Thank you, Ryan.
Thank you.
Coming up, celebrated artist Tom Forestall has died. We'll hear from an art curator about his life and legacy. Acclaimed Nova Scotia painter Tom Forestall has died. A pillar of Atlantic realism, Forestall's work was shown across Canada, the United States, and Europe. He was 88. We're joined now by art curator Ray Cronin. So how would you describe Mr. Forestall's impact on the art world?
You know, Tom was someone who was very humble, but who was, I'd say probably the most beloved artist in Atlantic Canada, and certainly in Nova Scotia. He was a pillar of the arts community. He was somebody who was very generous with his time and with his art. There was never any organization that asked for a donation, always got one. But more than that, he was an artist who, well, he was one of the three most famous Atlantic realists. It was him and Mary Pratt and Christopher Pratt. They were all students of Alex Colville, and they created a form of a way of painting, a way based in Atlantic Canada that was, really unique in the whole country. And they were really among the best known artists from the 60s right through to the present day in Canada. Tom was also an innovator. He wouldn't, he used to talk about the tyranny of the rectangle. He didn't think that paintings should necessarily be all the same shape. He wanted paintings that were round and that were triangles and that were squiggly and curved. And he was always experimenting. And right up until the last year, he just sent a new painting to Toronto that was round, that you could spin like a lazy Susan.
Wow.
So,
now, how much influence did Alex Colville have on what Mr. Forestall painted?
Alex Colville was hugely influential, and Colville taught Tom how to paint with egg tempera paints, which is where you mix the powdered pigment, the color, into actually egg yolks, which dry clear. And it's a very old style, a very old technique that goes back to the Middle Ages, but Tom loved it, and he used it for 60 years. And that was directly from Colville, and Colville was always a model as well for Tom. They had different kinds of subject matter. They approached painting differently. Tom was more observational than in the sense of painting what he saw. Colville was maybe invented more of his scenes, but Colville was always the model. He was the person that Tom compared himself to every day. And again, as I said, he was very humble. He never thought he ever got close, but I think the history will show that he was a peer of Colville, rather, not just a student.
Now, what would his paintings go for at auction?
Auctions can be so funny, but his paintings certainly go for anywhere, for mid five figures. So a painting could go for anywhere between $25,000 and $75,000, depending on the year, the subject, the size.
Now, I understand he was painting until just a few weeks ago.
Well, and he painted with watercolors every day. And in fact, I saw him last week, a week ago exactly, and he had been painting that day. He made, over his lifetime, he made hundreds, probably low thousands in numbers of paintings, but he made tens of thousands of watercolors. He did them literally every day, and he loved the medium. And it's sort of, I think, egg tempera is very meticulous and very precise, and you paint with tiny little brushes, whereas with watercolor he had more freedom and it's more loose. And I think he liked the contrast of those two styles. But yeah, he was painting right up until just a few days ago.
What do you think his most recognizable work might be?
Well, I think especially in Nova Scotia, probably the most recognizable is Island in the Ice, which is a very large painting. It's almost 6 feet across. That's been hanging permanently in the Art Gallery of Nova Scotia now for 30 years almost. But it shows Devil's Island out in the harbor with the lighthouse and ice flows all around it. And people of a certain generation will remember back in the 90s when Halifax Harbor was completely filled with ice. And Tom just thought that was the most amazing thing. And so he painted this huge, spectacular painting that, as I say, it's been on view forever. It's in the Ondaatje Gallery at the Art Gallery of Nova Scotia, and it's really, really worth a second visit if people want to go see it.
And before I let you go, what would you say about the legacy he leaves behind?
He was an artist's artist. He was somebody who was generous with his time. He was somebody who worked constantly. He did not, he was a full-time painter since 1960. That's how he made his living. And that, that's a very hard thing to do anywhere, but especially in Atlantic Canada. And I think that he was a model for other artists for integrity and for how you can actually go and succeed and make a living as an artist and keep true to your own ideals and your own work.
Ray Cronin, thanks so much for your time. We appreciate it.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thanks for asking.
Coming up, polarizing picks. Donald Trump continues to shape his cabinet with controversial appointments. The roaring lion, a famous portrait of Winston Churchill, is back in its rightful place after being stolen during the pandemic. Welcome back. With Republicans in the U.S. winning control of the presidency, the Senate, and the House of Representatives, it's clear Donald Trump will have a powerful mandate to govern. But some members of his own party are concerned about some of his choices for cabinet. This week, 3 controversial Trump supporters were tapped for key posts. Steve Futterman now with the details on who they are and an archaic rule that may ensure their places in power.
Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is one of the latest. Trump wants him to be Secretary of Health and Human Services.
We want you to come up with things and ideas, and what you've been talking about for a long time, and I think you're going to do some unbelievable things.
But many believe having someone who is a skeptic about vaccines isn't a good fit.
There's no vaccine that is, safe and effective.
One of the things that was always certain was that the Secretary of Health and Human Services believed in science, believed in the power of public health science to improve people's lives.
Kennedy isn't the only outside-the-box nominee. Trump wants conservative firebrand Matt Gaetz, who has never tried a case in court, to be Attorney General, and former Fox News host Pete Hegseth to be Defense Secretary. Traditionally, nominees like Gaetz and Kennedy and Hegseth would need to be approved by the Senate. But there's a crack in the system that Trump has suggested he's willing to employ. It is called a recess appointment. If Congress is in adjournment for at least 10 days, an appointee can serve without being confirmed for up to 2 years. Some Republicans say they would go along with that.
So you support that recess appointment, and for Gaetz potentially.
Sure. Yeah.
The Wall Street Journal, often on Trump's side, has blasted the idea, calling it unconstitutional. It would eliminate one of the basic checks on power that the founders built into the American system. And Matt Gaetz could face another problem, a House ethics report on allegations that he was involved in sex trafficking with an underage girl. The report has been completed but not released. Some in Congress on both sides say they want to see that report. Steve Futterman for CBC News, Los Angeles.
Talks for a truce between Israel and Hezbollah ramped up today. Iran and the U.S. are now involved as Israel keeps up on pressure on the Islamist group in Lebanon and the countries that support it. Crystal Gumansing has the story.
A senior advisor to the Iranian supreme leader was in Beirut as Lebanese officials have a truce proposal in hand. It comes as Israel conducted airstrikes in the southern suburb of Beirut for the fourth consecutive day. Israel Defense Forces did issue evacuation notices for 2 neighborhoods before conducting those strikes. Images from the ground show large buildings being toppled in 2 neighborhoods. Lebanese state media described them as heavy strikes. They could be seen as a pressure tactic to persuade Lebanon and Hezbollah to accept the deal. The American truce plan is the first to be proposed to bring an end to fighting in Lebanon. Now, the Supreme Leader's advisor told local media in Beirut that Iran backs the Lebanese government in any talks, saying Iran is not looking to disrupt anything, and it shifted focus to Israel, calling it the disruptor. Israel launched its ground offensive, what it calls limited raids into Lebanon a month and a half ago. In a briefing on Thursday, Israeli officials said it had killed more than 2,000 Hezbollah operatives in that time, acknowledging the deaths of 52 Israeli soldiers in Lebanon. Now, Israel stated that its goal is to stop Hezbollah from posing a threat to Israel and allowing people living along the border to be able to return home. Israeli officials say weapons are being moved to Lebanon from Syria, and on Thursday conducted airstrikes around the capital of Damascus. Now, Israeli officials say they were targeting members of the Palestinian Islamic Jihad and that those sites were operated by that group. It's another group linked to Iran and a group that took part directly in the October 7th attacks along with Hamas. The spokesperson for the Israeli military, Daniel Hagari, said Israel will strike anywhere it is necessary. Crystal Gumansing, CBC News, London.
The number of people killed in Sudan's civil war is significantly higher than previously thought. According to a new report, more than 61,000 people have died in Khartoum state since last year. That's about 3 times greater than previous estimates by the United Nations and doesn't take into account the rest of the country. Researchers say 26,000 people, about a third, were killed as a direct result of violence. Disease and starvation remain the leading cause of death for 2/3 of the casualties. The 19-month-long conflict has created the world's worst humanitarian crisis. The UN says fighting has displaced 11 million people. Nearly 25 million people, half of Sudan's population, need aid due to famine. Well, help may be on the way for an untold number of people essentially trapped 4 kilometers underground in South Africa. They've been below ground in a mine for weeks without food or other vital supplies after the government decided to crack down on their rogue industry. Chris Brown has the latest developments.
Somewhere at the bottom of this abandoned South African gold mine, there could be hundreds, possibly more than 1,000 illegal miners. Their anxious families waiting above want them to come up, but if they do, police have said they'll be arrested.
We only want the police to help us so that we can take those people from underground so that they can come outside, because there they've been trapped without food, without water, without nothing.
From here, go down about 500 meters. We stay about 7 days, 1 week or 2 weeks.
The miners, known as zama-zamas, or take a chance in Zulu, are usually desperate people, many who once had proper mining jobs, who spend weeks underground digging for dust and ore.
This one is a gold.
South Africa's government ordered a crackdown 3 months ago and sealed off most exits to the mine, along with a warning from a top cabinet minister.
We're not sending help to criminals. We're going to smoke them out. They will come out.
Many stuck below are now believed to be too weak to come up on their own. But late Friday, after a meeting with advocates for the miners, the government's position appeared to soften.
We need a much more quicker process, because it is risky and dangerous for them to remain where they are.
It was agreed that the police will now send a rescue mission down.
Christopher Rutledge heads an NGO that's assisting the miners and was part of that key meeting. He says the challenge of illegal mining in South Africa is complex and difficult to change.
In some instances, corporate mines would close down their operation and then allow the zama-zamas to go into the mine, and they would buy the gold from the zama-zamas, from the artisanal miners, because it's cheaper for them. Okay?
It's unlikely the just-announced rescue mission will happen until Monday. The remaining miners are believed to be in the deepest sections, and the first task will be to send in food and water. Chris Brown, CBC News, London.
Delegates attending the COP29 climate conference in Azerbaijan are making little progress towards a deal to help developing nations adapt to climate change. Climate activists say richer countries need to raise up to $1 trillion a year. Developing countries say they need that money in order to set ambitious climate goals. The CBC's Abby Kuavasan reports.
Climate activists at COP29 say pay up. They're demanding the conference figure out a way to shell out the funds needed in order to tackle climate change.
If we reduce the fossil fuel subsidies, if we tax the richest, we could be already generating sources to pay for climate change.
A recent UN report highlighted the Earth is now on track to hit 3 degrees by the end of the century. But scientists say even more needs to be done. And so while the agenda in Baku is under the microscope, so is the host nation, Azerbaijan. A letter has been sent to the United Nations from scientists and senior climate figures who say the conference needs to be held more frequently, but also hosted by countries that back climate action and the phasing out of fossil fuels. It follows comments made by the Azerbaijani president Ilham Aliyev to attendees that oil and gas was, quote, a gift from God. And just days ago, further controversy after a BBC investigation found a senior Azerbaijani official using his COP role to organize meetings to make fossil fuel deals.
We just have to decide how long the world is going to cower in front of the financial and political power of the fossil fuel industry. If we can find it within ourselves in every country to come together and make intelligent choices, we can solve this.
But further turmoil in Baku, too, as France and Azerbaijan are in a public diplomatic spat over overseas territories. Argentina has walked away from the conference altogether, and the European Union's negotiator suggested they are way off in agreeing to a finance target for COP29. Abby Kuavasan, CBC News, Berlin.
A famous portrait of Winston Churchill, known as the Roaring Lion, is back in its rightful place. The photograph by Canadian Youssef Karsh was stolen from the Fairmont Chateau Laurier in Ottawa. Paul Hunter was there today for the homecoming.
There it is, stolen from this wall in late 2021, early 2022, replaced on the wall at the time by a fake, later recovered by Ottawa police in Italy, then repatriated to Canada, reframed here in Ottawa, and now, finally, back where it belongs, on the wall here at the Chateau Laurier Hotel in Ottawa. The unveiling itself, a huge moment for all involved. What a journey it had been for this portrait of Winston Churchill, taken by famed Canadian photographer Yusuf Karsh in 1941, shortly after Churchill had given a wartime speech on Parliament Hill. It's one of the most iconic photo portraits on the planet. And as everyone at today's ceremony can attest, a true Canadian treasure. Among those at the jam-packed unveiling, Hotel General Manager Geneviève Dumas, who never lost hope it would one day return.
And the fact that it's here, the goosebumps were back. This is for the world to see, and I'm just beyond proud, beyond proud.
And yes, there is heightened security on this now. There's a plexiglass barrier over the whole thing. It is bolted to the wall all the way around it. If anyone dares reach underneath and even nudges the portrait, it will set off a loud siren. As Geneviève Dumas put it, this isn't going anywhere ever again. As for the investigation into the heist, a man arrested in the case faces multiple charges. His next court appearance is March 2025. But all of that is still to come. What matters for now is the Roaring Lion, as it's known, is home. Paul Hunter, CBC News, Ottawa.
Taylor Swift's Toronto era continues. The pop star will play her second show out of 6 at the Rogers Centre tonight. Her first was yesterday, and tens of thousands of fans had their wildest dreams come true.
I cried as soon as I got out. I feel so excited.
She got us. She got us.
I'm like full of adrenaline.
Yeah, I'm like
right
really
now.
shocked. Like I'm just like, I just can't. All of the stage props and the dancers and it was a whole theatrical performance, which was beyond what she's done in the past. Yeah, it was extraordinary.
It's the concert event.
So yeah, not maybe the greatest weather this weekend, but hey, it's still a weekend.
It's still a weekend. A weekend's a weekend. We will take it. And listen, a lot of folks probably need to get some shopping done.
Ah, that is true.
Right?
The early birds getting things off the list.
Or perhaps some indoor festive decorating. But yeah, it's not going to be a washout by any stretch. So if you want to get out, you'll be able to do so. Have a look at our viewer picture of the day. This one, we're zooming in to the southwest of the province, just south of Shelburne in Lower Sandy Point, and a terrific set shot.
You've had some spectacular ones.
Yeah.
That's one of them.
That is really, really nice. Beautiful color, the clouds coming in there, just terrific. John, thank you so much. Ryan's picks at cbc.ca. All right, so tomorrow we are looking at the potential for some double digits down the South Shore. And along that Atlantic coastline is going to be our best shot. We'll see the winds from the northwest, but much lighter than they have been this week. Of course, those winds were just relentless there for a few days, but they continue to back off and will be fairly light for tomorrow. Cape Breton will see southerly winds, again, swirling around this low. It's a variable wind for sure. All back to a northerly flow on Sunday. And yeah, we will likely see some gusts 30 to 40 kilometers per hour on Sunday afternoon. Temperatures in the 8-9 range. Now, looking ahead into next week, let's jump right to that 7-day. So we've got showers on tap for Monday and Tuesday as well. But again, both those days not a washout either. We'll see some sun breaks. Looks like our greatest chance will be Wednesday into Thursday. And then forecast models doubling down on this idea that we'll see kind of a system coming in on Friday with a substantial rain. And again, we do need it, as I mentioned earlier in the program. It's so dry, and those lake major water restrictions continue.
All right. Well, a diamond-studded necklace that belonged to Marie Antoinette was sold today at an auction in Geneva for 4.26 million Swiss francs, or more than 6 million Canadian dollars.
It's likely or possible that some of these diamonds may have come from the famous diamond necklace that led to the downfall of Marie Antoinette.
The piece contains 300 carats in diamonds. The piece was at the center of a scandal in the 1780s known as the Diamond Necklace Affair. A woman pretending to be the French queen acquired the necklace in Marie Antoinette's name without a payment. A trial found her blameless.
But it did nothing to alleviate the queen's growing notoriety for extravagance and helped fuel the French Revolution.
Well, there you go. Well, that is it for us tonight. Thanks so much for watching and have a great weekend.
Take care.